It is very important to understand that the 70 weeks of Daniel chapter 9 are based on the 70 years of captivity in Daniel chapter 9 verse 1 and verse 2. And the 70 years of exile that the Israelites were to go on are themselves based off of the law of Sabbath years and jubilees in Leviticus chapter 25, and the curses or the punishment for breaking that law of Sabbath years and jubilees in Leviticus chapter 26. Let me explain to you. You see, in Leviticus chapter 25, and I hope that you will read it for yourself, says that every 7th year the Israelites were to allow the land to keep a Sabbath. So they were to cultivate the land for 6 years, and then every 7th year they were to allow the land to lay fallow with no cultivation. That was a Sabbath year. And then they were to count 7 Sabbath years. In other words, they were to count 7 weeks. See, each year was considered to be a day, according to Leviticus chapter 25. So 6 years are 6 days. And the 7th year is the 7th day, which is a Sabbath day or a Sabbath year. So they were to count 7 Sabbath times, which is 49 years. And then they were to consecrate the 50th year as a jubilee. Now, the jubilee meant that that's when all debts would be released. That's when all sins would be forgiven every 50th year. Okay? So it's very important that you understand that the 70 weeks of Daniel are based off of this. So now, when the children of Israel went into the land, at first they kept the Sabbath years as they were supposed to. However, during the reign of King David, they stopped keeping the Sabbath years. So every 7th year, they did not keep the Sabbath year. And then every Jubilee, they did not observe the Jubilee. They did not forgive one another. They did not release the debts as they were supposed to. They did this for a total of 70 Sabbath years. In other words, they neglected 10 Jubilees. Remember, a Jubilee is every 50 years, right? But a Sabbath year is every 7 years. So 70 times they did not keep the Sabbath year. Therefore, according to Leviticus chapter 26, they were to go away for exile. They were to be in captivity until the 70 years they had neglected would be accrued again. The land would lie without working. The land would enjoy its Sabbaths until the 70 years were done. Now, it's important to understand that the children of Israel neglected the law of Sabbath years and jubilees for 70 weeks of years. And therefore, they went away for 70 years of captivity. Now, when the years of captivity were ending, Daniel is studying the book of Jeremiah and, of course, Chronicles. And he realizes the reason why they had gone into captivity for 70 years. So he begins to pray to God, and he begins to ask God for mercy and for forgiveness for what they had done. And because he was highly esteemed and loved by God, God sent Gabriel to him. And Gabriel tells him, because you are highly loved and esteemed, God has answered your prayer. God has heard your pleas for mercy. Therefore, 70 weeks are decreed for your people, Israel, for your holy city, and for the sanctuary. Notice that now God has completed the punishment for the 70 weeks they had broken the law. He's giving them a new set of 70 weeks of jubilees. Very important. So they had broken the first 70 weeks. They went away for 70 years. Daniel prays for mercy and grace and forgiveness. God hears the prayer and gives a new set of 70 weeks. So very important. The 70 new weeks that they are being given is so that they can do what they did not do before. So that they can keep the Sabbath years every 7th year and the Jubilee every 50 years. They must do this without fail, without neglecting it, because every time they miss a Sabbath year, every time they miss a Jubilee, they would pay for it in exile in the future. This is very important to understand. So the 70 weeks of Daniel are equal to 70 weeks of years, which is 70 times 7, 490 years. Exactly the same number of years that they had broken the law since the time of King David until the time when they went into exile at the time of King Nebuchadnezzar. So now, it's very important that you understand this, that the 70 weeks of Daniel are 70 weeks of years to fulfill the law of Sabbath years and Jubilees. And they were to start counting from when the decree was given by King Artaxerxes in 457 BC. In fact, that prophecy is so precise that Jesus appeared, according to Daniel 9:25, exactly at the 69th week. This is when Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, exactly 483 years from when King Artaxerxes gave the decree to rebuild Jerusalem in 457 BC. So, then it says in verse number 26 of Daniel chapter 9 that Messiah, that anointed one, was going to be cut off after the 69th week, after he makes a covenant for 1 week with people. So Jesus was supposed to give, in the last week, the 70th week, he was supposed to give a covenant, and he did. Remember, the day before he is crucified, he confirms the covenant. This is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for the forgiveness of the sins of the many. Then the 70 weeks don't stop. When Jesus died, the 70 weeks continued for another 3.5 years, because the 70 weeks must be kept under the law of Moses consecutively without any gaps. Because remember, when they had gaps in the previous 70 weeks, in the time of King David all the way up to King Zedekiah, they had to go for exile. So that's why the 70 weeks of Daniel must be kept consecutively without a single gap in between. There is no gap between the 69th and the 70th week. In fact, we now know that according to the law of Moses, the 70 weeks given to Daniel ended in 34 AD. And we know that that is the same exact time that Stephen was killed in Jerusalem, and that the Israelites rejected the gospel of Jesus Christ that was now in the disciples in the power of the Holy Spirit, and they scattered them from Jerusalem. The 70 weeks ended right there. One more point. When Jesus appeared and after he was baptized, he actually declared that he had arrived in order to fulfill the 70 weeks. He says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. At the very end of that passage in Isaiah 61, he says, and to declare and to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. The acceptable year of the Lord was the year of release. The acceptable year of the Lord was the Jubilee. Jesus arrived to say, I've come to fulfill the law of Jubilees that was declared by Daniel, that was based in Leviticus 25 and of course Leviticus 26. That's why there is no gap between the 69th and the 70th week or any other part of those 70 weeks. The 70 weeks are weeks of the law of Moses. And Jesus said, I have not come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come to fulfill them. And he did exactly that. The 70 weeks of Daniel were fulfilled by 34 AD. The 70 weeks of Daniel are behind us. They are not in our future because the law of Moses is already abrogated. The law of Moses for Israel from God is already done for. It is not in our present. It is not in our future. Dear Christian, I hope that you understand this. I hope that this gives you insight and understanding as God intends for you to have it. May the Lord bless you as you meditate on these things, as you learn these things, so that he is glorified in your heart and in your mind and in your walk of faith. In Jesus' mighty name.